Okay. It's very brave of you to be here already this early. So let me see if I don't. I don't think. Can you hear me? You can't, or you can. Okay. Off. Switch it off. So yes, bright and early. Welcome. I think I will see a few more people coming in. But not only were we scheduled at 8 a.m., but also in the most remote room at 8 a.m. So I think that means if you come here, you really have already overcome quite a few hurdles. I prepared this tutorial together with Rafa and Camilla. sold in small individual quantities to the customers coming in. But also some of the products that are consumer products, consumer branded products, they are there in little sachets where customers can buy like one serving over there. So this also sort of shows that suppliers, they are actually taking into account this market and how this market is operating. So the companies like the Unilevers and the Procter & Gambles of this world, they have adapted their product offering to this.
Excuse me.
Now,
You may need to turn on the mic real quick. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
okay, yes. And now, if you take this back to what is there in the literature, so the literature, our literature on retail operations is by and large, well, up until a few years ago, probably 100%. Now it's maybe 99%. But this is about this type of retail, right? Think about retail and retail operations. We think about this type of retail. Actually, because a lot of research is a bit US biased, actually most of the retail is even about Walmart. So we think Walmart is sort of representative of retail in the world. And while Walmart is a great company and great studies have been done, it's only a very, very small part of what's happening in the world. There's only 300 million people living in the US. This is a very small part of the world population. So somehow we, as a community, we have decided we focus on studying the US, whereas this is, I would say, it's a minute part of the world population, right? And that has also driven the type of questions that are being studied, right? So what you see there, typical questions that have been studied over the last 20 years when retail was there. Things like assortment optimization, routing, a lot of routing, inventory management, linked to that, management of waste, staff scheduling, pricing. So lots of problems, relevant problems, from the perspective, typically, of these large retailers making these decisions. And along the supply chain, we see quite a bit of research around the contracts that take place between these retailers and their suppliers. So think of VMI, and only inventory. There's quite a bit of literature around this. The consequences of information sharing, is information sharing good or bad? How can this improve the supply chain? What are the associated risks? So those are the problems, and in the last probably 5-6 years, we see this being expanded to everything related to online retail. Both in digitizing the current processes, omni-channel retail, and so I would say that sort of characterizes modern grocery retail, what in the industry is called modern retail, as compared to traditional retail, which are the mom and pop stores. But if you go into these stores, this reality is totally operation, while actually the number of consumers that are being served in this channel is an order of magnitude larger than what is being served in the online channel. So these were pictures one of my students took on a field trip in Peru. So you see the stores are very small. They in this limited space they stock quite a bit. But the space could be limiting. Oftentimes they are maybe in dangerous neighborhoods, so need to protect their goods. I also saw this in Africa. Quite a few of these pharmacies were behind bars, fully behind bars. And there are suppliers, for instance, that put equipment there. Right? So like Coca-Cola is a very well-known brand that is very active in this market, and Coca-Cola typically puts equipment like a fridge in these stores with some shared ownership or ownership by the store with some help in financing from the supplier. So this leads to different types of problems in this context that are being made on a day-to-day basis by all these suppliers in these markets. In Africa, actually, tends to be even more fragmented than in Latin America, where we do most of our work, where stores are even smaller and oftentimes also out in open markets. Now, to give you an idea of size, so we estimate globally in the grocery sector, there's about 50 million of these stores. They serve about 4 billion consumers. So 4 billion, this is more than half of the world's population who are dependent on these stores to buy their daily groceries. And these include the poorest consumers at the base of the global economic pyramid. Within these markets, this channel is usually the dominant channel, so the largest channel that is there. Market share varies quite a bit, but in many countries in Latin America, it's sort of between 40 to upwards to, let's say Brazil is a bit lower. If you go to Bolivia, it's up to 85%, so that type of range. We have done quite a bit of work in Morocco. Morocco, it's around 85%. Sub-Saharan Africa, well over 90%. India, also around 90% at the moment, the market share of this channel. And the interesting thing, and one that I think will lead to also more research being conducted, is that there is a rapid digitization taking place due to the smartphone being available, being accessible to data, in many cases being relatively cheap, and both suppliers but also new players that are VC funded getting into these markets and developing new applications to try and make this channel more efficient or more effective for the manufacturers that are there. Now, in the tutorial book, actually, that came out this week, link to this tutorial series at Informs, we characterize this traditional channel compared to the modern channel. And there are quite a few distinct characteristics, but I would like to highlight a few that are there. So one is that surprisingly large number of deliveries actually take place there. So that implies either the manufacturer or an agent on behalf of the manufacturer going directly and visiting these stores with relatively high frequency on typically 1 or more times per week to resupply these stores. This is, in a sense, somewhat surprising to quite a few people, because you would expect that almost all this would be through wholesalers. Of course, there are markets where these wholesalers are there, particularly markets where the nanostores are very, very small and don't come through. But there's lots of direct deliveries. This has many consequences, right? If you think, for those of you that are in transportation area, there's huge opportunities for research around transportation and distribution there. The financial flow, so many of these stores, they are informal, so they may not be formally established, and as a consequence, they do not have access to a bank account or to formal credit. That implies that the actual financial flow relies on cash transactions. And traditionally, until very recently, this was actually physical cash. I think quite a bit has been digitized, depending a bit on the country. But still, it is the cash payment, even if you is made. There may be some credit given by the supplier. So trade credit is is in some areas common. So they may finance this, and Omar has a very nice paper on India on how credit actually works in this context. Um, but also these shopkeepers themselves, they tend to give out credit again to the consumer, because consumers are also short on cash, and the knows they will get and again, even in rural Africa, when we were there earlier this week in these pharmacies are quite reluctant to give out the credit because people are very, very poor. But they also say they have these arrangements, for instance, if consumers need to take a series of antibiotics of 5 or 7 tablets, that they can take a credit tablet by tablet, because each of the tablets may otherwise, the complete series of tablets may not be affordable to pay at once. Right, so these shops make this work. Um, Category depth, for those of you that have a background in retail, category depth is the number of SKUs that is there per product category. So I think of toothpaste, how many different brands do I keep of toothpaste? Now, if you go to a modern supermarket, you will find a relatively wide or deep, I should probably say, depth. Um, but the nanostore in the traditional channel is not the case. So typically it's 1 or 2, which implies that if I, as a supplier, manage to get my product on the shelf, the competitor is out. And again, around this topic, interesting modeling work being done around competition, because this is actually one of the drivers why this visit frequency is also high. Because if you don't manage to keep up your visit frequency, essentially the competitor can get into your shelf space. So that's there. More detail in the paper. Most of the work that we have done studies this relationship between the manufacturer and the store itself, right? If you think of a manufacturer and a retailer having a relationship, this relates to demand generation. You can call this marketing or whatever. In any case, generating the consumer demand, processing the orders from the shopkeeper to the supplier. Of course, physical distribution, the payment collection, like I already mentioned, and the after sales service, in a sense. Managing the shelf, making sure the things look right within the store. Now, in modern retail, most of these functions have become completely separated. So these have become siloed, both at the supplier side and at the retailer side, right? So with Walmart certain trade terms. And this negotiation is more than separate from the way they organize the supply. Right? So these functions have been separated. In the nanostore context, this is not the case, because this is a single shopkeeper doing all of these functions over there. And that means as a manufacturer, I also need to look at this joint offering. This is the driver for a lot of the research that has been going on, because this implies that we actually can take elements from different functions that have an impact on each other. As in the modeling example that I will give, I will show that, let's say, that the choice of distribution channel impacts the amount of sales. And normally, if all of the other literature around channel choice focuses on logistics costs typically. Right, so here we get at that point then a different trade-off. In other work, we have been looking at the impact of the payments and whether there's delayed payments on demand generation. Right, so as soon as you start thinking about linking these different perspectives that in modern retail have been studied more or less separately into joint analysis, this actually provides new and what I believe to be interesting insights. Now, most of the work that has been done in this space, at least a number of you have also contributed there, is around assortment optimization, routing and pricing from the perspective of the supplier. So it's the supplier actually setting this. And these are, in a sense, also problems that were there in modern retail. Framing is different. But also new problems emerge, like channel selection, like optimizing the effort that I do in terms of sales, my sales agents that go out there to sell products, optimizing visit frequency, or managing the cash flow. So these are new problems that emerge out of this new context, leading to both whether you do modeling work or more empirical work, lead to new questions around this. Now, to sort of zoom in a little bit, I'll explain briefly how the happy flow, I think is your term, Rafa. What's that? With the happy flow, right? Yeah. So this is Rafa's happy flow. Maybe I should call it Rafa's happy flow in that case. Um, so there are by and large two different distribution models. So one model is a model which is called van sales. So this implies that the delivery agent visits the store, the shopkeeper places the order is registered, and the items are immediately sold from the truck. Brought to the shopkeeper and payment is collected. Yeah. So in this type of sales model, what is an important decision is what do I put in the truck early in the morning because I don't have the orders yet, and how do I maybe dynamically over the day sort of modify my sales strategy depending on availability. The other model is the pre-sales model, and in this pre-sales model, the sales process and the delivery process are separated. So on the first day, typically this is a day in between, although in India I understand it's mostly 2 days. So there is a sales agent visiting the store, taking in the order. Then overnight the order is picked, put into the truck, and the next day the delivery takes place. And again, it's typically payment on delivery. So as soon as the delivery is done, the shopkeeper pays at that point in time. Now this is everything goes right. There are many things that can go wrong here, and this would be probably the not so happy flow. And the not so happy flow is actually also an opportunity for improving these operations. For instance, I remember when we started writing papers around this, and we were talking about the rejection rate. A rejection rate implies the order is placed, it's put into the truck, it's being delivered, and the shopkeeper has no money. Because the shopkeeper essentially needs to project the available cash 24 hours ahead of time. And that is actually a complex forecast. If you're running very tight on cash, essentially I have my uncertainty in demand and in my sales. I also have my family expenses that I somehow need to take care of. So maybe I don't have money available to actually pay for the order upon delivery. And at that point, there is a rejection of the order. Now, this is the sort of the simple way of framing this, and this is a good start already of starting to think about alternative ways or restructuring the process, or maybe looking at the trade-off then with maybe giving a little bit of credit so that this doesn't happen. But in reality, often this process is even more complex because often the delivery drivers, they have a very strong incentive by the supplier to make sure all the deliveries take place. So what these delivery drivers may do is rather, if the shopkeeper doesn't accept the order, they may try and sell it to other stores. So just go around and do sales during the day. Now, this is typically not recorded, but around. Now, if you move towards optimization, this requires a good understanding of let's say, at least the order of magnitude of the problem parameter. Otherwise, it's hard to start modeling, right? Because when you start to model, you need to make sure that the main trade-offs are in your model, and you don't want to clutter it with another element. Now, a challenge is that we started this, I think, right. Good point. So we've so far mostly focused on groceries and what they call groceries. So not, I would say, not perishable in the sense like fruit and vegetables, but could be perishable in the sense of dairy, for instance, where there is a clear expiry date, or bread. Those are products that we have also worked with. What you typically see in that context, I think both in the dairy and in the bread examples that I've seen, is that the supplier takes expired products back, avoid understocking. This is sort of simple. So the supplier typically guarantees to take the expired products back. So that's there. You go to fully perishable like fruits, vegetables, etc. That's typically a completely separate channel, because this goes through through wholesale markets with all types of traders and distributors in between. I would love to study that. It's very difficult to get access to data on that type of markets. And also to develop a full understanding, because also between the central wholesale market that is often there in a city and the shop, there is a whole set of all types of traders that within a few hours somehow manage to get these products there. And I think it's very interesting. It's also very relevant, because one of the challenges from a public health perspective is that a lot of the food that is sold in these stores is junk food. And particularly in Latin America, this is a big issue. And that implies that to get actually healthy food is a risk to the shopkeeper because of its perishability. So they would typically understock on this. There's been some great work done by Cristiano Flores in Brazil, who's done field experiments working with meal boxes that are based on a subscription basis, similar to HelloFresh, that's there in Europe or in the US, in order to try and get more healthy food through this channel. Yeah, I focused here, and I think also in the models I will. Yeah, does that answer your question? So then we get questions like, well, what's the problem structure of the routing problem? I believe routing problems in this context is not just an issue of different parameters. The problem itself is also different. How impactful is this visit? Sort of probably intuitively understand that if I visit less frequent, my sales go down. But this is a few percentage point, or is this really a massive effect? This will heavily influence the motivation to actually start modeling this, because if the effect is very small, it's probably not a big effect. I will show later actually the effect is huge, and similar to the effect of credit. And now with digitization, with digitization, these shopkeepers get also opportunities to start making use of additional ordering channels. So not just ordering from their regular suppliers, but there are also marketplaces that have entered into this market, etc. So this changes the dynamics in the channel. Digital services. So in many developing countries, there are all types of services, for instance, payment of utilities that need to be done in or other types of things. These are being digitized, and shopkeepers can offer that as a service to take in these on a smartphone application. And gradually, country by country, there's really a revolution happening in terms of digital payment. So I saw this in India, but also in Brazil with PIX. So massive initiatives, either by the government or by private parties, they make wallet payments or digital payments easier. And I think this will really completely change the way this channel operates, because this allows, for instance, one of the things I saw in Africa is one of the new suppliers there in the market. They were giving 12-hour credit. So the idea is I deliver in the morning, the shopkeeper can sell during the day, collect the cash, and then pay in the evening. And this is a 12-hour credit, and it cannot be implemented in physical cash, because then you have to send twice people to the stop, which is it's too costly. But if you have a digital payment, then essentially the transaction costs go down to close to zero, and this allows then a 12-hour credit, which impacts sales in the channel. So this digitization really has a major impact on the way these businesses are conducting, and we've been fortunate to work with a number of these startups also in this area to try and understand their business models. Now, I started this in 2012 with actually a number of to try and understand this market. And this was qualitative work, so we spent quite a bit of time sort of on the ground trying to understand what was happening and to frame the problems. The book is still there. I think it's actually still quite descriptive. We have updated is on digitization a couple of years ago, so that's the recent development still in there. And as I said, so the way I work, and I've also done prior work in when I was in an organized retail, I go out to try to understand what is happening. This is a bit more challenging sometimes in this context. But this was my very first trip to go out. You can see I was a few years younger, and this was my bodyguard, who was making sure I also returned safely to. I'd like to take you briefly through one of the models as an illustration to how we make decisions around this modeling. So this is a stylized modeling context, and how particular elements that are characteristic of this context come back in this model. And so here we look at the decision from a manufacturer, whether I go what we label here as direct, so that means sales agent, or I have an exclusive company that I somehow pay to do this on my behalf, but where I face all of the cost still in this distribution, right? So this means sending the sales agent out, doing the distribution, essentially myself, and incurring all of these costs associated with visiting these stores. So I have higher distribution costs, but if I go direct, typically I also sell more. But this is an example where sort of the operation, the logistics, and the sales volume and sales growth, they are directly related. Versus a wholesale channel where I could decide, well, I sell to a wholesaler, obviously at a lower margin, then I don't incur costs, but also I'm faced with a lower growth of my product. And we actually partially motivated by some work that we did in Colombia, where we had a manufacturer deploying both models even within the same city. And we saw there was a difference between, to give you an idea of the sales growth between these two channels on the difference was more than 10% in sales growth. This paper came out a couple of years ago in Now, what we do here is we first we model the demand. Over here, what you see, this is the instantaneous demand rate. So demand rate, which is dependent on the market size at a particular moment in time. And we have over here, we frame this as an availability multiplier. This essentially tells me, well, if I have a particular market, I can serve that market better if I actually I will do more effort of being there on time, having plenty of stock, etc. Maybe finance a little bit. Whereas in the wholesale, the structure is exactly the same, but the demand rate is typically a bit lower because this beta is lower in the wholesale channel. Yeah. And then we let this market, this overall market, we let this grow following to a production diffusion model, which essentially is an S-curve, which is very common being used. And over here we have also a growth rate of the overall market. Right, so there is a beta which links to my operations, having the product available on the shelf, put more effort in this. And then I have my market, which I can also grow more because I put more effort in getting to the shopkeepers, being in direct contact with them. Now that leads to this type of a curve for the demand. So you see that demand then develops depending on a curve, and a typical strategy could be, well, I sort of start with going direct. I use that to actually grow my market, and once the market is not growing anymore as a whole, I sort of saturate it, and I could choose to go to wholesale to take advantage then of the lower cost there in distribution. Good outcome, right? So that's what we look at. We don't limit any of the strategies going direct or wholesale. So the way we formulate the problem, we say, well, at any particular moment in time, you could choose to go direct or in wholesale, but we actually prove in the paper it's never optimal to have more than two. Right, so it's either all the period direct, all the period wholesale, first direct, then wholesale, or first wholesale and then direct. So that's the demand side. And then we have the logistics side, because we also need to model the logistics costs, and these are, just by way of illustration, a couple of different neighborhoods in Bogota, where you see differences in density between the stores. Those of you that know a little bit about logistics, density is higher. This implies that my cost per store to serve in terms of logistics, they go down. This is a quite intuitive relationship. And what we do is to formulate this, we make use of the continuous approximations of Carlos Daganzo. So in that way, we essentially, so if we go to the wholesaler, essentially our logistics cost is essentially going up and down to this wholesaler that's positioned centrally in this neighborhood. And if we go direct, essentially we look at the capacity of the vehicle and we split the entire area to be served in a number of vehicles, and then we use this Daganzo approximation. And the nice thing, if you bring these two together, you get actually a pretty nice expression. It looks a bit messy, but actually it is pretty nice. If you sort of, so here you sort of we write out the entire profit from the perspective of the supplier. And you see in the end that boils down to an expression that we characterize in two main parameters, where MD, or the M, relates to the gross margin that I'm making on the product, which going direct, this gross margin is higher than wholesale. And this KD essentially is representative of the on the input parameters, right? So the model actually becomes quite elegant in terms of its trade-off. Now in the paper we do then a number of further analyses. We do first we look at the case where the market is saturated and stable. So I have a stable market, and we can identify the areas where we go direct, where we go wholesale, or where we don't enter the market at all. And this then depends on the density. So essentially what you see, if the density increases, the density of stores, essentially I go more direct. The same is with the overall market, right? So if the overall market increases, so my total market, the number of goods that I'm delivering, if this is higher, I also go more into going direct. So that's for the stable case. In the case where demand grows, we get a number of curves, the number of graphs that look like this. So what we see here is that there is the trade-off is determined by this margin that can be realized relative compared to the demand growth that I can realize. So if I can realize quite a bit of demand growth, I can do additional investment. So I would have an inclination to go more direct and reverse for wholesale. But the interesting thing is that there is quite a big impact of the time horizon over which I'm making this decision. So if my time horizon, so what most companies do is they evaluate this decision and they say, well, we look at the cumulative cost over 3 years or 5 years, and in that way they evaluate a project whether to invest and actually go direct or not. We need to get a fleet of vehicles, sales force, etc. And essentially, what this graph shows here is that if this decision horizon is too short, in general, these companies will only do wholesale, right? But for growth, the opportunity of market growth. And this aligns a lot with what we also observe in the companies that we work with. So typically companies like local players, they've been around for a long time, they tend to all go direct because they have more longer term, right? If you look at international companies that are entering into developing market, what we observe there is that there are really distinct strategies between companies. I think the most prominent one that I've observed myself, but there was also some years ago an interesting article around this in The Economist, is between Unilever and Procter & Gamble. So Unilever, in many of these countries, they go direct. So they evaluate, they make their evaluations with a bit longer decision horizon, whereas P&G managers, they need to evaluate projects by corporate guideline within 2 years, with a 2-year payback time. And in 2-year payback time, it's almost never possible to actually recoup the cost of going direct, because there's insufficient market growth that you can realize in this short period of time compared to the investment. And we can actually explain these type of differences with this little model. So it implies that if you look at this model, the premises of the model are specific to this channel, right? So we say, well, the strategy itself, whether I go direct or not, this impacts the growth rate in my demand. It also impacts on-shelf availability because of the effort that I put in over there. And it impacts the logistics cost. And then the store density also impacts the logistics cost. So these are all characteristics that in order of magnitude are really important in this channel. And the link between the sales part and the logistics part is very specific, right? So that's an illustration of a paper where this is. There's many more papers around. I highlight a few here. there is, I think, on this van sales versus pre-sales trade-off, there's an interesting paper in that appeared some years ago, where they essentially look at the fundamental trade-off there. It's actually an applied paper, so there's a lot of data also in the paper. So if you're interested, I think it's a nice paper to look at. Then, well, you want to summarize your paper? That's okay, but so there is in India the way the yeah, it's kind of so there is stockist, which is very particular concept in India, which is somewhere in between an exclusive distributor and a wholesaler, so how financing, but also financing the channel. And this is a very particular setup that in India has grown over the past 100 years. It was actually introduced by Unilever more than 100 years ago. And in this paper, actually, Anand and Mar, they they analyzed the contract structure of the relationship between these stockists, also in Amazon. We've been looking at a number of papers also to the distribution logistics, the operations. We do in this paper a queuing model to sort of look at availability of space to park and the impact that this has on service times for delivery. And this is another, I think, a very nice paper based on a project that these researchers did in Philippines, where nanostores that are a bit more remote, they actually form a cooperative to jointly buy products in the central, more larger towns. And in that way, both are able to get better prices and save on logistics costs. And there is an analysis also on when this collaboration is stable or not. These are just some examples. There are also work underway, not yet published, as far as I'm aware, around sales effort and retail competition. But the body of work and understanding is growing. So that's on the modeling side, right? Now on the side, there's been really a big growth in work. Actually, Rafa has been an important contributor of this growth in work, particularly since all the papers got accepted in the last few months. This work, there's been quite a bit of work, a series of papers around trade credits, around visit frequency, and currently work underway on process digitization. So this is empirical work typically done in collaboration with the supplier, because the suppliers, they have the granularity of the data of all the sales and deliveries to these stores. And then in these projects, we essentially leverage right, so here we're trying to get a more detailed empirical understanding of the mechanism, but also the effect size. So it is in a model, if you do a stylized model, this is great to provide insight into the structure, but it's very difficult without any empirical data to get an idea of the effect size. So here there's empirical evidence being gathered by us and other researchers there. This requires obviously very granular data to be available. And on the DV side, we typically look at either commercial outcomes or operational outcomes. I'll highlight here a paper that is actually still under review on order-based trade credits. So over here, there is a credit system being studied that essentially allows shopkeepers for one particular order to pay 1 week later. So the credit is order-based. So it's not a traditional credit line, if you like. But essentially, I place an order and I already uses the buy now pay later thing. Here we use the order-based trade credit. So for this work, we work with a distributor in Peru for paper products, and we had access to all of their orders over what is it, 3 years time. So they were serving 20,000 stores in Lima, Peru, and over this period of time, at any particular moment in time, about 6,000 of these stores had received a credit. And if you then look at the analysis, if you were interested, look at the full paper for all of the specifics. But essentially, we see that this 1 week credit leads to more than doubling the sales. So this sort of illustrates how cash constrained these shopkeepers are, right? So just allow them to pay a week later, and the sales double. This is really a massive effect happening, strong effect. And this, if you look at how this is built up, you see that first of all the conversion rate goes up. The conversion rate is whenever a sales agent visits, that actually more likely that an order is being placed. But also, if an order is being placed, this order is larger, it has more categories, and more SKUs. So there are multiple elements that actually contribute to this increase. Now, if you then say, well, so if we talk to suppliers and we share this, then the first thing we always get back, but what about the defaults, right? So I give this credit, what about the defaults? So we did a little simulation there. You see over there, so without any interest rate. Oh, this is through a little bit thin. But you see over here is the incremental supplier profit, and you see that if we take for the supplier a gross margin of 25% and a cost of financing of 4%, you see that the weekly default probability needs to exceed 15% for this not to work out. In reality, this default probability is actually pretty close to zero. It's just in the low single digits percentage points. So that implies that this makes a lot of business sense to do this, to give this credit. Then, let's say, talking to these suppliers, so not the supplier within this project, because they're applying this credit, but other suppliers, they typically say, well, but we want to then charge the interest rate, because they will make money out of this. But you see, compared to what you get out of the profit, because the reality is somewhere in this sphere, what I get out of my additional sales margin is order of magnitude more than what I could get in terms of interest payment. And what we see in the field is that as soon as there's interest being charged, the adoption actually goes down substantially. So shopkeepers are reluctant to take credit for which they need to pay often or being charged oftentimes a large interest rate. This effect is also sustained over time, so that there is a long-term effect. It's not just a one-off where I one-time increase my inventory, but actually you see here that sales are really consistently going up and increasing. And then Wang Yuan, who's over there, Wang Yuan, yes, I'll questions to him. But I'll just have one slide. But here we did a more detailed heterogeneity analysis. And I won't go into all of the detail, but essentially what you see over here is the gain, the potential gain in sales. And you see that the smaller the stores are, the larger this potential is in terms of the sales increase. And if you want to hear more about this, join Wang Yuan's presentation. This more. Ooh, it sounds like a power outage. 5. So later this morning. Okay. Starting up. Oh, tomorrow. Did I put Sunday? That's a mistake. My mistake. But okay. So not Sunday, but Monday. And at 10:45. All the details about that. Thanks. Ah. Ah. Okay. Then a visit frequency. So with Sebastian and Rafa, we just got the paper out in Apple. Just came online about a month ago. And what we show here is that actually changing the visit frequency, it is intuitive that this would impact sales, right? So if I visit less frequently, the shopkeepers, they need to bridge a larger amount of time with their limited cash, so their orders go down. But here we show actually that the effect is quite substantial. This is depending a bit on the direction and the environment. I think it's somewhat by simply adjusting the visit frequency once or twice a week. Again, here also persistent effects over time. Thank you. Yeah, see you later. Now, what is interesting in this paper, I really like this paper a lot, as I hope my co-authors also do, is that, of course, in the empirical data, we can observe the effect of what is happening. And we can do a lot of analysis to establish causality, but we cannot fully see what is happening in the shopkeeper's mind when they make these decisions. So what we do in this paper subsequently is we run a series of behavioral experiments in the lab. And Sebastian approached me some time ago now on this, and he said, well, I think we can replicate this environment in the lab. And I was very skeptical, but he was right. Because we sort of can see what these shopkeepers are doing when they are cash constrained. So we give them in a lab context an ordering task, but we also provide them with cash constraints and with a necessity to take out cash on a regular basis to for the immediate needs of their family, which is sort of how these shops operate. And we see over here, for instance, there's many interesting findings in the paper, but one of the things that we see is there is really a diversification. So if they are very constrained, and we give them the option of 2 products to order, one with a high margin and one with a low margin. If you're very constrained, it's actually optimal to spend all of your money on the high margin product in that particular setting. But all of these shopkeepers, they diversify more. So there is diversification going on. And we provide also some theoretical explanations for this. The other interesting finding, and I don't even think this graph ended up in the paper, but it's still a cool graph, I think, because it somehow provides insight that these shopkeepers. Let me explain the graph. So over here we have the optimal decision making based on a theoretical model, and this is what actually happens in the behavior in the lab. And these shopkeepers, they can order high margin products and low margin products, or keep the cash that they have available. And we have over here a situation in which cash is very, very tight. So the size of the bubble relates to the amount of money that they have available. And here you can see how they spend the money. Now you see in both of these cases, it is actually optimal to spend all of the money and to invest this in inventory. Under just doing an optimization. But we see they keep almost a quarter, and here almost a third of the money they keep with them as a hedge, because somehow they have this continual, we tell them every month, every period, a certain amount of cash will be taken out because you need to take care of your family. And it seems they hedge this quite a bit, so this leads to substantially lower investments. those are only relieved when the cash constraint is completely gone. You see that between the two products, they don't necessarily make the optimal decision, but in terms of the amount of cash that they withhold, they actually come pretty close, right? So the tighter this cash constraint is, the more conservative they are in actually keeping cash in their pocket. So what this implies is that these suppliers essentially they have two options if you think about handling this cash, right? So if they visit more frequently, they can actually sort of overcome these problems with this cash cycle, and the other way would be credit, like we have seen. Now, Rafa's been conducting, I think, maybe the toughest thing he ever did in his life, and this is a field experiment where essentially these two were combined. So this was an actual intervention in the field. All of the studies, empirical studies are reported up until now, based on observational data. But this is an experiment in the field. And over there, we essentially varied high and low in terms of visit frequency and yes and no access to credit. I won't go into the details of the papers and all of the problems Rafa can you're giving a talk also on this, right? When? You want to advertise it? Tomorrow? Okay, tell me the details in a minute once you find out. But what we and this is the environment, right? So this is a very, very difficult neighborhood. This is one of the poorest neighborhood in Lima, in eastern Lima, where this field experiment was conducted. And this is Rafa trying to convince 30 sales agents that they had to reduce the visit frequency on visiting their clients, which was not necessarily the easiest task, right? When is your talk?
It's tomorrow, 2:15 in Summit 43.
Okay, so then you can hear all of the details about this field experiment. We essentially what we find there. So what we did is we had this 2x2 design. There's about 1,200 stores, a random allocation of stores to treatments, etc. And we essentially find that part of this effect of reduced sales through visit frequency reduction can be overcome by additional credit, but not everything. And the interesting thing is that, well, there are many interesting things, but if you want to hear all the details, go tomorrow. But I think one of the interesting things is that if you look at the stores that do take the credit, they're actually compensating for more of this. But many of the stores, even though the credit is completely free, they don't necessarily want to take the credit. Right? Still, we had much higher credit adoption, what is typically there in the development economics literature. We've done a lot of work around microcredits, but it was lower than what we found. Now, I think based on this empirical research, there is now space to develop more formal models. And there are quite some interest. So the empirical material is out there, it's available. I think researchers are accessible. And there is an opportunity both for the straight credits, visit frequency. I didn't talk about process digitization today, but to actually take these results and develop more formal models, stylized models to try and formalize the behavior there. Now, to move towards a conclusion, we have actually in the tutorial a chapter that actually the editor said that was their favorite section was how to do this work. So I suppose I want to start, right? Well, I think one of the things I hope I made clear this morning is that it is really important to understand context. If you've never been out there, I would really recommend to go out there. And this may not always be feasible, but then the empirical papers are probably a good start. But I think, as in any research, go out to the field, observe, talk to the shopkeepers, etc. And of course, I think let's say if you have a limited budget out of your research budget to spare, it's worthwhile maybe going to a conference less and spending some extra time in the field. There's a strong payout for this. I think for those of you that do modeling work or do experiments in the lab, it is really important to take these key characteristics of this situation into account in your model. For instance, I think a lot of the decision making by these shopkeepers, and I hope that at least I provided quite a bit of evidence for this, this is based on cash flow and on surviving on the cash flow. This is very different from profit maximization. And the modeling of this cash flow based decision making, this is still in its infancy. I don't think we have yet very good models how to do this. I think in the Amazon paper that we just came out, we get some structural insights, but there's not yet a formal model that's there. And I think this is highly relevant, because once we get a more formal modeling representation that is also consistent with the empirical findings, it will also allow suppliers to maybe tailor or develop smarter credit instruments or smarter payment periods. There are all types of, I think, innovations that can come out of this. For those of you that do routing and logistics, there's a whole lot of opportunity there, particularly around the stopping times, and there's some more detail on that in the paper as well. Now, if you are excited about this and want to start, what can you do? I think first, and I think you already mentioned your comment on perishables, so the current work, almost all of that is on dry goods in grocery retail. So there's a huge amount of other industries that also are in this channel. And like I mentioned, we are starting now to work on pharma. But for instance, apparel, fresh groceries, construction, durable goods. There's one paper on durable goods by Morigi Fatunde, who looks at, I think it was stoves, like stoves to sell. But construction, for instance, is a very, very big industry. And the way this construction materials work is this also goes into this nanostore channel, who have bags of cement and they sell this by the kilo. This is a very big industry, and I think there are many opportunities in other sectors for us to still learn from. Then we have technology initiatives. I think it's interesting to learn from that. So PIX is a digital payment system that has been introduced in Brazil, and that has completely transformed the way payments operate. And it's almost incomprehensible the speed. This was like within a year or so that they went from 0 digital payments to like 70% or so. So it's a massive change, and I think we can learn from this, because this does lead to changes actually in the operations. In India, there is a new initiative. They had their payment initiative some years ago, but now there is a new initiative since a few years called ONDC, which is hard to summarize in a few words, but essentially it's a neutral e-commerce platform operated by the government, where or e-commerce infrastructure. Let me phrase it like this: where the idea is, well, the e-commerce infrastructure, this is just important infrastructure as a road infrastructure or a financial infrastructure. So the core trading in e-commerce should not be in the hands of a few monopolists like Alibaba or Amazon, but should be a public function. And that means, and there are private entrepreneurs who are then on the platform to develop products. It's still, I would say, disputed even maybe a bit. But it's interesting to see already that many of these kiranas, they're actually on ONDC and making use of some of the products. There's new data one of the data that we've been trying to explore is the use of satellite images. So highly granular satellite images, particularly to get more insight into rural economic activity. I've seen that there are some interesting studies that have come out in economics leveraging this data. I think it's interesting. We have still not somehow been found a way to link this to this type of work, but I feel there is an opportunity there. And then, yeah, I hope I made clear that, let's say, whether you do stylized modeling or optimization or field work or lab experiments, I think whatever your method is, there is an opportunity with this type of work, and there is great impact, right? So this is 50 million, not just 50 million shopkeepers, but it's also the families of those shopkeepers and the consumers that are being served there. And for instance, in this channel, the logistics costs are very high as a share. So with the studies that we do, we think, I think it's possible to sort of cut half of the logistics cost by better coordination in the supply chain, and at least part of that gain will be passed on to consumers, which are typically the poorest consumers in the market. If you want to know more, we built a website, nanostores.world. I encourage you to have a look. We're still further developing, but we try to post papers that are there, at least the papers from our research team. But if you would like your papers posted there, you're more than welcome. Please reach out. We also recently built a few tools. So the model that I presented earlier on, you know, this model is not, the paper is somewhat technical, not necessarily easily accessible. But we built now a tool online on the platform where essentially you can play with the parameters and then generate the type of curves that I was showing earlier. And I'm going to experiment with using that in undergraduate education in a few months. If you're interested, it's open, it's accessible. And there is a second tool which should come online. I don't know, Rafa, whether it has already been put online. You haven't checked? But the effect of giving credit on sales as a trade-off with default rates and interest rates. So this particular curve also has been created as an interactive graph over there. So we have that around. So everything is there that I know about from our group. Finally, another sort of teaser to go into this. I think all of this is within the context of responsible retail. And there is a special issue upcoming of EMSOM with a deadline next summer, August. So there's still some time to start some new work. And we look forward to seeing your papers there. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. And I actually ran over time. This is really bad. Okay, sorry about that, and thanks for attending. If you have any questions, I'll take them offline to allow you to go to the next session.